Success in the restaurant business isn't just about the food. It's about knowing when to stay in the kitchen and when to step into the spotlight. I learned this lesson from my father, though not in the way my in-laws might think. My name is Lisa Chen, and for the past 5 years, my mother-in-law, Helen Zhang, has been telling everyone who'll listen about her daughter-in-law's quaint little failure of a restaurant in San Francisco's Chinatown. What she doesn't know is that I own the fastest-growing luxury Asian fusion restaurant chain in North America. It started 10 years ago, when I graduated from the Culinary Institute of America. Instead of taking prestigious offers from Michelin-starred restaurants, I decided to help my father run his small traditional Chinese restaurant, Golden Palace. The place was nothing special from the outside, just another mom-and-pop shop in Chinatown with fading red lanterns and worn menus. "Why waste your education?" Helen would say during family gatherings at her mansion in Pacific Heights. "My son married a chef, and she can't even succeed at that." My husband Michael, a successful architect, would squeeze my hand under the table but stay silent. His mother's approval meant everything to him, and she knew it. What no one in the family knew was that Golden Palace was just the test kitchen for something much bigger. Every night, after the regular service ended, I experimented with fusion recipes that combined my classical French training with my father's traditional Chinese techniques. We served these special dishes to a carefully selected clientele: food critics, restaurant investors, and social media influencers who didn't know each other but all thought they discovered a secret menu. Word spread quietly but steadily. Soon, mysterious investors were approaching us about expansion opportunities. But I had learned from watching my in-laws' real estate empire, growing too fast could mean losing control. Instead, I created Golden Dragon Hospitality Group under my grandmother's maiden name, Lin. As far as anyone knew, Golden Dragon was owned by a reclusive Hong Kong restaurant mogul who never gave interviews. The company began opening high-end restaurants in major cities: Vancouver, Los Angeles, New York. Each one was an instant success, with month-long waiting lists and glowing reviews. I ran everything from my tiny office above Golden Palace, using video calls and a trusted team of managers. My father helped me maintain the secret, proud to see me building something on my own terms. "Let them underestimate you," he'd say in Mandarin, smiling as he chopped vegetables. "The best recipes are the ones that surprise at the perfect moment." The Zhang family, meanwhile, was expanding their luxury hotel business. Helen and her husband Peter had built Zhang Hospitality into one of the largest hotel groups on the West Coast. Their crown jewel project was the upcoming Golden Bay Hotel in San Francisco, a billion-dollar property aimed at ultra-wealthy Asian tourists. At family dinners, they loved to remind everyone of their success. "We've already pre-sold the penthouse units," Helen would boast, "and we're in talks with all the top restaurants for our dining venues." I knew they were struggling with those restaurant deals. Their first-choice tenants had all signed exclusive contracts with Golden Dragon Group instead, though they didn't know I was behind that yet. Last week, everything came to a head at the monthly family dinner. Helen was particularly smug, having just returned from a trip to New York where she dined at the newest Golden Dragon restaurant. "Now that's what a successful restaurant looks like," she declared, looking pointedly at me. "Not some little Chinatown takeout place. I've tried to get them for our hotel, but they're very exclusive. Only work with the best." "How did you like the red chili oil dumplings?" I asked quietly. They were my signature dish, a recipe that had taken years to perfect. "Divine. The owner is clearly a genius, not some pretend chef-playing restaurant." I smiled and excused myself early, citing prep work for the next day. Behind me, I heard Helen telling Michael for the 100th time that he should encourage me to sell Golden Palace and get a real job. What they didn't know was that I had spent the last year secretly preparing for the perfect moment. Golden Dragon Group had acquired every major restaurant space within a 5-block radius of their new hotel. We bought out leases, outbid competitors, and structured deals that gave us complete control of the high-end dining scene in the area. The Zhang's Golden Bay Hotel was scheduled to open in 1 month. They were counting on their restaurants to attract the wealthy clientele they needed. But they were about to learn that in the hospitality business, location isn't everything, timing is. I drove home that night in my modest Toyota, while the Zhangs all drove luxury cars, thinking about the letter sitting in my office safe. It was from Golden Dragon Group to Zhang Hospitality, ready to be delivered at exactly the right moment. My father called as I was getting home. "Is it time?" he asked in Mandarin. Almost, I replied. They're about to learn that the little Chinatown restaurant they've been mocking is just the tip of a very large iceberg. The morning of the Golden Bay Hotel's grand opening dawned clear and bright. From my office above Golden Palace, I watched the final preparations through binoculars. Workers hanging banners, valets and crisp uniforms practicing their bows, Helen Zhang directing everything like a general before battle. I knew she was nervous, though she'd never show it. The hotel's success depended on its dining venues, and all their first-choice restaurants had mysteriously declined. They'd had to settle for second-tier options, and advance bookings were disappointing. At precisely 9 a.m., my assistant delivered an envelope to the hotel's management office. By 9:15, Helen was frantically calling Michael. "Your wife needs to come to the hotel immediately," she demanded. "It's an emergency." I took my time driving over, parking my Toyota between Maseratis and Bentleys. The hotel lobby was spectacular, all marble and crystal with a 3-story waterfall. Helen was waiting by the elevators, her perfect makeup barely hiding her agitation. "Do you know anything about this?" She thrust a letter at me. It was from Golden Dragon Group, announcing their acquisition of all restaurant leases in the surrounding blocks. "They're going to strangle our business before we even open." I took the letter, pretending to read it carefully. Interesting timing. Interesting? It's a disaster. Our hotel restaurants are already struggling, and now every decent restaurant nearby will be our direct competition. She paced frantically. Peter's trying to contact their CEO, but no one can reach them. They're represented by some law firm that won't tell us anything. "Maybe I can help," I said quietly. Helen laughed bitterly. "You? What could you possibly do? This is real business, not some little dumpling shop." Actually, I pulled out my phone and opened my private email. I could call Christine Wang at Golden Dragon right now. She handles their operations. You know their operations manager. How? Because I hired her. I showed Helen my email signature. Lucy Lin, CEO, Golden Dragon Hospitality Group. Or more accurately, I am her boss. The silence that followed was deafening. Helen stared at my phone, then at me, then back at the phone. That's impossible. Golden Dragon is owned by a reclusive Hong Kong restaurateur. I smiled. That was a convenient story. I've been running Golden Dragon Group since I founded it 5 years ago. Every restaurant, every lease, every acquisition. All me. She sank into a lobby chair, her world visibly tilting on its axis. But your little restaurant. Golden Palace is my test kitchen, where I develop new recipes, train chefs, perfect techniques. Those red chili oil dumplings you loved in New York? I created them in that little dumpling shop you loved to mock. Peter Zhang burst out of the elevator, followed by their lawyers. "Helen, the situation is worse than we thought. Golden Dragon owns everything within." He stopped short when he saw me. Helen was still staring at my phone, which now displayed Golden Dragon's complete portfolio, 37 restaurants across North America, with 12 more in development. "Hello, Peter," I said calmly. "I believe we should discuss your hotel's dining options." The next hour was surreal. In the hotel's main conference room, I laid out 2 options for the Zhangs. Option 1, Golden Dragon would open competing restaurants in all our nearby locations, effectively ensuring the hotel's dining venues would fail. Or Option 2, I continued, Golden Dragon takes over all your hotel's restaurant spaces. We bring our reputation, our chefs, our waiting lists. We turn Golden Bay into the city's premier dining destination. "You planned this all along," Helen whispered. "All those years pretending to be." "I learned from watching you," I replied. "You taught me that perception is power. I just chose to be underestimated rather than overexposed." Peter, ever the businessman, was already calculating. "Your terms?" "Standard management contract, but with one condition." I smiled at Helen. "You both have to come eat at Golden Palace. At the family table, in the kitchen where I first learned to cook." The lawyers spent the next few days working out details, but the deal was done. Golden Dragon would operate all dining venues in the Golden Bay Hotel, instantly making it the hottest reservation in town. That Sunday, Helen and Peter came to Golden Palace for dinner. I seated them at the small table in the kitchen where my father and I had planned everything years ago. She watched in silence as I cooked, finally seeing what had been in front of her all along. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked eventually. Would you have believed me, or would you have tried to take control, like you do with everything else? The next family dinner was different. Helen was subdued, watching me with new eyes. The other relatives, who had finally learned the truth about Golden Dragon, weren't sure whether to be apologetic or opportunistic. Michael found me in our home kitchen that night. "You know what's funny?" he said, hugging me from behind. "Mom keeps asking herself how she missed it, but she never actually asked you about your work. Not once in 5 years." Golden Bay Hotel became a massive success, largely due to its restaurants. Hotel guests have to book dining reservations months in advance. The waiting list for my chef's table is over a year long. I still run Golden Palace, still develop new recipes in its kitchen, but now Helen comes by sometimes, sitting quietly at that kitchen table, watching me work. Slowly, she's learning that success doesn't always wear designer clothes or drive luxury cars. Last week, she brought her granddaughter, my daughter Amy, to the kitchen. "Teach her," Helen said simply. "Teach her to build something of her own." I smiled and handed Amy an apron. Some recipes, after all, are worth passing down. The Toyota still sits in my parking spot at Golden Dragon's corporate headquarters. The valets have learned not to question it, just like they've learned not to judge success by its cover. Yesterday, a young chef came to me for advice about starting her own restaurant. As we talked in the Golden Palace kitchen, I thought about perception and power, about quiet success and loud failure. "Build something real," I told her. "The recognition will come when it matters." Golden Dragon continues to grow, but its heart remains in that small Chinatown kitchen where it all began. Every new chef we hire trains there first, learning that the most important ingredient in success is patience. And Helen, she finally learned that sometimes the most powerful people in the room are the ones you've been underestimating all along. After all, in business as in cooking, timing is everything. And revenge, like the perfect dumpling, is best served at exactly the right moment.